Trying to get by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets left center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Three of the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
So I think what matters right now, I guess, is that you have an opportunity to talk your shit as the only North American team to move on in Copa.
I thought you were going to give me some sort of props for the draft, and then I remembered I didn't pick up any points. So
No, I won with 7 points.
Yeah, so I'll take that, I guess. Mexico sucks now, so that doesn't feel as good. But the U.S. not going through and Canada making it through, it's a feel good moment in a group with Argentina. I was gonna say in a tough group, but in a group with Argentina where there was only one spot available. I feel like there's an accomplishment there. Now I don't know who we're gonna face. We're gonna face either one of Uruguay, Venezuela, or whoever wins between Brazil and Colombia tonight. So that might be as far as it goes, unless we get Venezuela, which is probably the only hope we have of moving on any further. But Uruguay, Brazil, and Colombia are not. This is my reward. My reward is the fact that they went farther than the U.S. and Mexico, and that's it. So.
You know what, man? I think that's enough. Like,
yeah.
I don't.
No,
because,
they're not going to win, right? Like, that's the thing. So. Unless
I don't know.
Like
I saw Romania
Greece.
almost beat whoever they beat, Netherlands.
Yeah, but like, so you can win one, but then to win the whole thing, you basically got to beat. They'd have to run the gauntlet. They'd have to beat Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina, presumably all of them, right, to get to the final and win. So that would be Greece level, accomplishment to actually win that tournament. So I don't think they're there yet, but. They look good. I can't complain. They look good. They played well.
No, I thought, I didn't watch a ton of Canada play, but I don't think there's too much you can be sad about with how they looked. I think, honestly, more than anything, I think you're just happy to watch Mexico and the United States burn out. Do you know how bad it has to be for me to look at Alexi Lawless and be like, he's making good points? Mm-hmm. That doesn't feel good. Like, I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. were in a similar situation group-wise as Canada. They had the favorite in their group, Uruguay and Argentina in Canada's group, and then there was some decent teams in the mix. I just think they didn't, they underestimated how good Panama was, and that game they lost to Panama was the decider. That was it at the end of the day.
And I think that's, for me, that's the part of this where it's like I'm not taking, like, I said this to you before the tournament. I don't root for the men's national team. I consider them to be an embarrassment. And I am not like the most patriotic person, but when it comes to national team shit, I'm all for it. Like, let's go. Yeah. But I refuse to root for the men's national team. They've embarrassed us entirely too many times, and they all just seem like dorks. And I'm using that to be nice. But like, there's players on this who, like, at the last, like, okay, so there's a dude who wrote an article for ESPN about them crashing out of the tournament, and he basically made the point that, like, last World Cup was like the first act. That, like, ooh, look at all these players, like Pulisic is at Dortmund, and then he's at Chelsea, and Reyna, I think, was at Dortmund.
And they
whatever.
got commitments
and like
from
McKinney and
players
Adams,
too,
and like there's fucking Yedlin, was at Newcastle. Like, it was like, these are exciting young players who are playing on real teams in Europe, because for years it had always been, well, we're not getting players in Europe if we're just playing with, like, B-level MLS talent. Like, we're not actually going to be competitive. It's like a little bit of Landon, a little bit of Toward, a little bit of Clint Dempsey, like, being abroad, and that's cool, but not really much. Like, I'm sorry, but you're not going to tell me that, like, Michael Bradley's wearing the armband and I'm supposed to take that team seriously.
Yeah.
This group was supposed to be better. And the article was just like, turns out they're not.
Well,
They're
like-
just not as good as we had hoped they were.
The fall off
And-
from all those guys you mentioned too, like at the time, Pulisic was at Chelsea, and now I think he's the only one who's maybe maintained some of the status because he's at AC Milan and he plays regularly for them. But beyond that, like McKennie's at Villa now, I think, or if he's at, I don't. There was a transfer to Juventus. I think Juventus and Villa swapped players, so whether he's there or not, he's now like third option. At Juventus, you've got Gio Reyna, who I don't know if he's still with Dortmund, but he was on loan at like Forest and didn't play a single game. Yedlin plays in the MLS now, so he crashed out of the top flight in the Premier League. So all these guys that they had kind of bookends to be successful and play well, they didn't. Then they got commitments from guys that just didn't really show up. They got commitments from Yunus Musa, and he was not that great. They got a commitment from Balogun, who chose the U.S. over England, and transferred from Arsenal to Monaco, and he was okay. I think he was probably one of their better players of the tournament, but still, like, they have all these guys, all this promise, and this is probably the best team on paper that they've ever fielded, and they crash out.
100%. They absolutely. This is like. Again, I find myself having to agree with Alexi Lawless, which infuriates me. But he was like, this team, like, let me say it this way. These players are better. Like, this is probably the most talented bunch of American players, American men's players that we've had. That has not translated to a better men's national team. And that's the problem.
What's wild is it comes at, like, the downfall of Mexico as well. Like, they're nowhere near.
Right. You would think there would be a window.
Yeah, there is a window. I mean, Canada's on the rise, but
I mean,
they're still not at that same level talent-wise. But the downfall, like, it was the U.S. and Mexico for how long? But Mexico always had the edge, and now they've fallen. They have no, like, their golden generation is over. They don't have anybody coming in to replace the legends that they used to have. So this would be the time for the U.S. to step up and be the only team from North America that makes it through, and they just, again, it's like the what we've been talking about all week with England and their inability to utilize the talented roster they have to have any success. I mean, obviously
Yeah, but I mean, the one thing I'll say about that is like, part of the problem with England is it's like, I think American fans think them and England are in the same, where it's like we have all this talent and the coach isn't doing a good job.
Very light version, but yeah.
The problem is the coach isn't making anybody better, and that's what a coach is supposed to do. As we've talked about over the last several years with the Ducks, like, what you want your coach to do is to make players better than they are. But the problem is the initial you can only be so much better than what you are. And if you're not very good, what you get up to middling?
Yeah.
You know, again, like, I don't mind losing to Uruguay. Uruguay's the most successful team in the history of Copa America, I saw the other day. Okay, that's fine. I'll get my ass kicked by them. They're the head of the group.
Yeah.
Like you said, that's the team that's supposed to win the group. I have no problem with that. You can't fucking lose to fucking Panama, bro.
Yeah.
Like, you just can't. You can't be at a point where you're like, ooh, I sure hope Bolivia and Panama draw so we can go on. That's unserious behavior. Like, what are you doing? That's where you shoot yourself in the foot. Like, I don't think they have to be making deep runs in the tournament. What I would just like to see is a team that doesn't make themselves, like, doesn't dig down.
Yeah.
That's the thing the American team, the American men's team, I want to be very peculiar because our women are great. The American men's team digs down. They make everything worse. I will say, Christian Pulisic going over to the refs and telling them to go celebrate with Uruguay after that game, A+ shit. That is A+ shit.
Yeah.
That is very funny.
Oh man, there was yeah. Honestly, when you watch the Euros, and I try and give all respect to the Copa America, but it's not the same. It really isn't. Like, the drop off, I think, from the top 4 teams in Copa to the rest versus, you know, you've got Turkey now in the quarters for the Euros. Like, you've got Slovakia almost pushing England. You got Slovenia almost pushing. They push Portugal to pens. Like, there's more, right? There's just more talent. There's better games. There's, you know, You're not getting 5-1s here or there every, you get a couple,
No.
but it's just a
Right.
deeper talent pool, I think.
All that being said, if they want to play a baseball game, I'm good. Let's go. Let's see what happens. Let's watch fucking, Panama beat the U.S. in baseball.
Yeah.
Or, I'm not even talking about Panama. I'm talking about Europe. I'll fucking smack the shit out of those dudes. Anybody in Europe ain't touching,
No.
No.
But
it's the culture in the game and things like that. Like, you could try to find the best fucking baseball team from Europe, and they would get blown out by the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, the closest thing
who is a very small country, but a very talent-rich country and a very history-rich country. And that is, I think, what you see with Euros, with like Turkey or Romania or all these other teams. They're very small countries, population-wise, talent pool-wise, but they have a very rich history, and it allows them to build forward and try to create momentum as they move through these tournaments.
Yeah, and there's a very linear focus on soccer as kind of the main avenue for top athletes there, right? So,
right.
Anyway, okay, we got to get into hockey because we're already 11
Okay.
minutes into the show. But
Are we really? That's crazy.
we have a lot to cover, in a sense. The draft is the main point. We timed this show to hopefully have a lot to cover for the Ducks from free agency. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We have 3 re-signings. 2 of them falsely counted as signings because they didn't receive qualifying offers and they were technically signed as unrestricted free agents. So, I guess 4 because Jensen Harkins signed today, right? So we have 1 official player who wasn't with the Ducks last year that was signed, and then we traded for another. So it's been a little bit uneventful, but the draft was the highlight. We had all the stress in the world leading up to the draft, wondering what the Ducks were going to do at 3, and I think heavily on the draft preview show, I said there's 2 things I don't want the Ducks to do. One of the main one is we don't want them drafting Sam Dickinson at number 3. Like that's code red, the worst case scenario that we could see happen. The other one for me was drafting Beckett Seneca at number 3. And we see, I think it was a few days beforehand, kind of that start to, just before we recorded that episode, it started to gain some traction. And then a couple hours before the draft, you get Cam Robinson tweeting out that he would bet significant money on the Ducks taking Beckett Seneca at number 3. And once you see that come out from somebody like that, you kind of start to dread a little bit. I will say this it was the same feeling almost last year with Carlson and Fantilli, right? Where not exactly the same, but where I preferred a player more than the other, and I felt like the upside was more. So I wanted Fantilli over Carlson, and we came around on it after, and Leo Carlson had a great rookie season, and it's not like Fantilli exploded or did anything significantly more than Leo Carlson did. So you kind of come around on those things. But this year, with the amount of options at 3, seeing Beckett Seneca go there was rough for me, just because of the concerns that I have. And I preface it with saying I like a lot about the player. I think I love the balls of the pick and to swing for the fences and take a guy that you think could be the best forward outside of Macklin Celebrini. Like, I get it. For me, the main stumbling block for me always is I always look for, and it's just my personal evaluation of players, is production in their draft year. And I don't like putting all the stock into the fact that his production wasn't anywhere near his peers due to the sole fact that he grew 4 inches and he was developing into a 6'2" frame from being 5'10". That is and will remain my concern until he plays about 30 or 40 games in the OHL next year. I can see that production, because it's the unknown right now, right? So
here's the question I have about that, because I don't think that's unfair, right? I think, if you want to be concerned, you're like, well, we seem to be putting a lot of stock into the idea that what was holding him back was learning a new body. Mm-hmm. The thing that I do think helps mitigate that point, in my opinion, is that he had, I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but he basically in the first 40 games or 30 games of the season had the same production as like the last 20 games of the season,
Yes.
like output wise. So he was far more productive at the end of the season, including playing very well in the playoffs.
Yeah, he had 25 points in 28 games to start the year. He had 43 and 35 after that, and 22 and 16 playoff games.
Like, that to me lends credence to what we're concerned. What his issue was learning his body, because as the season goes on, we see him improve. And I think that's the part of the pick where I think what are valid concerns are legit. Like, are mitigated. That's the part of that where I'm like, I think that's a fair point to bring up, but I do think, hi Loki, I do think there's reason to be optimistic that it is what we think it is. And I think the thing that's really interesting to me about the Seneca pick is Madden made a comment after the draft that, like, this number 3 pick wasn't the time to be conservative. And it was time to take a big risk. Like, and I'm fascinated by that, and I don't mind it. I'm not, because if you think about, you take Zegras, Drysdale, McTavish, Minchikov, Carlson. So you have your top 6 offensive stud, your top 4 offensive blue liner.
Mm-hmm.
You take a top 6 two-way center with potential high-end goal-scoring ability. You take another blue liner who looks like an incredibly dynamic offensive force. And then you take Carlson, who there's an expectation that he can develop into a first-rate top-line two-way center. And so if you're like, what we did with this other one is we basically were like, we think this guy is going to be really nasty in a few years. And he's going to provide a dynamic, a skill set, and a handedness that this team doesn't have. And I, like you said, I like the underlying logic, and just very selfishly to me, this validates how I feel about top picks, which is I do think you draft for fit and need at the top of the draft as opposed to best player available, because I think the back of the draft is where you back for best player available, because the odds of those players working out is already low.
Yep.
So it's, let's just get the best guy we can at this pick. Whoever the best guy is at this pick, that's the guy we want. At the top, it's like, these are all guys that should be NHLers. The floor should be fairly high. And now it's about, what are we doing with them? I like going for need there and being like, we just picked the guy that hopefully supplants Troy Terry as the right wing, on the top line right wing, right around the time Troy Terry's hitting 30.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he's going to be coming off an ELC probably around the time Troy Terry's hitting 30, 31. And if everything else goes to plan, he fits perfectly in the timeline as a low-cost option to be a difference maker for the team moving forward. I like all of that.
Yeah, I do too. I am too, and I think when you look at it objectively and you don't focus on the things that I'm focused on, the fact that there was a lack of production and the excuse for the lack of production, the player themselves, the profile that they have, the fit for the organization, all of it makes sense, and it all screams that you should definitely take a swing on this kid. And like I said, I love the balls of it. To go out there and take a guy that probably nobody else would have taken at number 3, mm-hmm. because you like his development and how he fits in your organization and what you think he's going to be down the road. It's not an easy decision to make, right? When there's other guys there, like everybody's saying to take Demidov or to take Tijja Ginla or to take Caden Lindstrom or to take this guy or that guy, and to go out and just actually swing for the fences and take him. And I love it. And I think that, him as a player, I think he has a lot of things going for him. He's got some of the best hands in the draft, dual threat winger, in regards to being a great playmaker, and has a great shot, and he's developed over the season. You see the fit there and how he could work, and how his skill set's going to work with the McTavish and Zegras and Terry and Leo Carlson, and how he can complement the Ducks roster. And I think all those things together, I really do love the pick for that. And for me, until I see him play a good chunk of games next year and see what the production is, there's always going to be that in the back of my mind, that concern, just because you never know. Because it's just the one thing I always look for in that. And it's even after being drafted, is year-on-year production and improvement in that production, and assessing how a prospect is developing. It's major to how I look at them. But when you look at the other guys available there, I do really like what Seneca brings. And, man, the potential of what he could become is pretty crazy. If you think, not where I am on the potential negatives, if you look at the potential positives of that, if this is, if the struggles were the fact that he was kind of getting and adjusting to a 6'2" frame, if the end of the season uptick in production was him finally getting comfortable, and if he comes out next year and becomes a 50-goal scorer, 100-point player in the OHL, all of a sudden you look at this as there's no concerns about this anymore. This is a steal of the draft, and this guy could be the best forward outside of Macklin Celebrini to come out of that draft. And then all of a sudden Pat Verbeek looks like a genius. The Ducks scouting staff and department looks like a genius, and all of a sudden the Ducks are looking pretty good with this pick. So I do, like you said, like the fact that you should probably take some risk every now and then, and why not take it at the top of the draft if you think this guy is what you think he is?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's very easy to say Demidov would have been nice.
Yeah.
You can talk yourself into Caden Lindstrom. We had that conversation. Let me ask it this way. Who is the other player that you would have been the most excited to take an upside swing on at that spot? Because I think for me, by the time the draft came around, I think that player for me would have been Perrick.
Yeah, outside of Lindstrom and Demidov, I think it would be Perrick. And if we're assessing fit and everything with the organization too, because I really do like Tijagindla, but I think for organizational need and what these guys could become and the seasons they had, like I think Zane Perrick could potentially be the best defenseman out of this draft. And he would have been the other guy that it's a swing still, because there are some concerns, and it is a boom or bust pick as well to take him at 3. But he definitely would have been the guy. And I think for me there is a drop off after that in terms of the potential for more than what we're seeing now. Like I do think obviously Tidge can be a great player, Buyam can be a great player, and a lot of the guys that went after that. But I'm better than what we're seeing, or significantly better than what we're seeing now. I think Perrick probably fits into that conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to look at where he fits into this team long term.
Yeah, well, after losing Drysdale, right? So
right, and not only that, but it also insulates you a little bit from Zellweger, who I think after Minchikov is your most dynamic offensive blue liner. I think having Perrick insulates you there in a way that would be very nice. Now, again, we're getting into counterfactuals and hypotheticals and, what's behind door number 2 stuff. Here's the thing I'll say, man. It's going to sound really funny, but, like, his whole, get down after being picked, I've enjoyed the hell out of. I think this is where you get into pop psychology with the draft and shit, but he seems to be shocked and excited about being picked in a way that I find endearing and optimistic. He wants to be that dude. Like, I think he was like, there's, what? Me? Who? What? Huh? But he didn't seem like, well, I don't deserve this.
No, the kid's got
He just
confidence for
seemed,
sure. Yeah.
he just seemed like, oh, I didn't think this is what it was going to be, which is fascinating to me too, because like we said, all the chatter. It's not like his agent didn't hear that shit. So the idea that he was that caught off guard despite the chatter around the league is very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it speaks well to his ability to keep a level head, because I do think at 17, 18 years old, it would be very easy to spend the morning, if not the week leading into the draft, hearing your name and getting an overconfidence about yourself that would be concerning. And again, this is all pop psychology. They're teenagers, but that's the point. I don't know, man. I think this pick is a very risky pick. I thought the Carlson pick last year was a risky pick. I think this is a riskier pick. And I also think, after talking it through with you, I see why this is the pick to take the swing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have accumulated a base of talent that allows you to go, oh, this would be a perfect addition to this group.
Yeah, it's what you need, and it's what, like, we've talked about, and even what Verbeek, and we'll get to this later, has mentioned what the Ducks need. Now, obviously, the comment he made was in the short term, but it is what the team needs right now, which is a goal-scoring right shot, right winger for the top six, and a right-handed defenseman. Well, you couldn't get the top right-handed defenseman in the draft because he went number 2 to Chicago. And I think if he was available at 3, he might have been where the Ducks were leaning if it was an option for them. I think if Levshunov was there with Seneca, like if Demidov went 2, then I think we might have taken Levshunov and Seneca would have fallen a little bit. But you get the one organizational need there, right? And it is, you're in the position to take a swing because, like you said, and like we've talked about before, you have the rest of the pieces in place that if this is what you really need, go out and take it. And if you are confident, or at least confident enough that you think he's going to be just as good or pretty close to being as good as the rest of these guys, then yeah, you save yourself a headache down the road of having to trade out one of these guys to fit them in, or bring a guy in later that fits what you really need. You've now brought a guy in that you can develop into your system, and you don't have to hopefully go out and get that later on. So the one thing I will say about this kid is, if you haven't watched the highlight reel, like, the Ducks had a theme, it feels like, in this draft of types of guys they drafted. They drafted guys that had ridiculous highlight reels, or guys that liked to destroy everybody else in the opposition team. That was kind of the trend for most of these picks. And Seneca's highlight reel this year is unbelievable. The kid has a kind of a pendant for putting up highlight reel plays and taking on defenders one-on-one. So if you have a chance to go look at it, I know there's one, I think Mitch Brown tweeted out right when he was drafted, that was circulating Twitter. The stuff this kid was doing this year was unbelievable. So I'm very, very excited, probably more excited than I have been in a while, to watch a prospect after the draft. And it's more so just because of the question marks, right? I'm excited to see him succeed, because I really, really hope that things go well next year and he takes that big step forward, because you hope that end of season uptick in production was the fact that he kind of figured things out and that he's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll just, this is stuff everybody has access to, but whatever, I'll just read it real quick. This is Martin Madden in a thing that the Ducks put out on the website. Other players in this draft are closer than him to playing and having a role in the NHL. He's not there physically yet, but ultimately, when he's part of our group, he's going to be an impact player. That's why we took him. Yeah, man, I'm not, if you think he has that chance, I'm not going to be mad about anything. Again, he has elite hockey sense, elite skill, and elite skating ability that will permit him to keep doing what he did in the OHL playoffs at the next level. I like a projectable, let me say it this way, not a projectable. I like a pick based on projection, because I think, like, my issue with the Sam Dickinson idea, right, is we're not projecting we're transferring. We're basically looking at Sam Dickinson and being like, this is what he was in the OHL, I believe. OHL, yeah, because he played for London. This is what he was in the OHL. We think now he'll be able to continue to do this at the NHL level consistently.
Yeah.
This is like, we think this dude is going to be better in the pros than he was in the OHL because of that growth, because of the physical growth that he's gone through and what that means for what was already his skill set. We believe very strongly now that there is an opportunity for this kid to be greater than what he has been to this point. I like that. I'll take that. That to me is better than this guy is good now and we think he'll keep being good. This is like, this guy's good now. We think he's going to be great later.
Yeah, there's something enticing about the type of players you get. A kid who's now as big as him, who's had to play small man's game for pretty much his entire career up until this point, and he has that way of how he plays, where you don't see it a lot in guys who are 6'2", 190 pounds. But he can't shed that now, and he shouldn't. But it's just kind of a unique type of player that you don't see a guy who can move and handle the puck as smoothly as he can. And the fact that he was able to still kind of keep that and almost improve on that, because the length that he now possesses to be able to pull some of those moves off, and you saw that on full display in some of the highlight packages, that it's almost added to his arsenal and his ability to puck handle and stick handle. It's impressive for sure. But if we talk about kind of a bigger player playing a small man's game, the next pick, the one we traded up for, is certainly a bigger player playing a big grown man game for sure.
This is a big boy playing like a big boy.
Yeah. The Ducks traded up, which was something we hoped they would do. It wasn't into a spot we expected. We were hoping between 15 and 20, and that wasn't the case. And it was up to 23. The Ducks traded up with Toronto to get there, which, I mean, hey, our history of trading 2 picks for 1 with Toronto has panned out significantly in the past, or for 1 pick for 2.
Right, I was going to say, usually it's going the other direction, but I'll take
any draft pick trades that we make with Toronto seem to pan out, and this one, I think, organizationally, the fit, if this kid was a right shot defenseman, we'd be over the moon. Still, love the pick. I love the fit, and I think that's the thing you love about these first 2 picks, is you can really see the organizational fit of these 2 guys, and you get the goal-scoring winger, and then you get the big physical shutdown defender in Stian Solberg. Kid competes almost harder than anybody in the draft. He's been playing against men for 3 years. That's the unbelievable thing. I couldn't believe that when I saw that he's played in the top division in Norway for the last 3 seasons. So I think since his 15, 16-year-old season, he's been playing against men, which is unbelievable. And he's heading over to the SHL next year, which is, I think, a perfect step in his development. I'd love to see him in the NHL, and there's a real good shout for him probably being physically ready to handle the NHL, but I think the SHL is a perfect step in his development. But this is a kid that that Elite Prospects label as the number 1 hardest hitter and the 5th best shutdown defenseman. And when you look at their rankings, their attribute system goes from 1 to 8. They give this kid an 8 in the physical rating, because he is a mean kid, loves to throw the body, loves to play physical, and that's probably the number 1 thing that he loves to do. And I think the best thing about this is it's not the only thing he can do. And I think that's the downside with a lot of these guys, is when you talk about some of the more physical players that you see sometimes going later first, second, third round, is they're usually 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" guys who play good shutdown defense, but they can't do anything else. It was a later pick, but what a guy reminds me of is a Connor Smith that we drafted from Peterborough, I think last year. Kid's 6'7", I think. He plays physical shutdown game, but he can't really skate. He's got a hard shot because he's just massive, right? He can get a lot behind it, but it's not accurate. First pass isn't really there. Transition, good luck. It's not going to happen. But Solberg almost has kind of the basis of like the typical, I know he's not Swedish, but the typical Swedish defenseman, right? He can make a good first pass. He's a decent skater. He's got some hockey sense to him. And then you throw in the A+ physical game to it, and all of a sudden you've got the tools for, at the very least, at floor level, a top 4 shutdown defenseman are one of the best at it. And then if the other skills can come along, if the skating gets better, if his passing and his hockey sense translate well to the NHL, all of a sudden you've got a kid who can really be something at the next level.
Yeah, I think it's going to sound funny to say it this way, but Martin Madden said we see him as a left-handed Gudas who's bigger. One of the things I think that was one of the most fun surprises of this season was Radko Gudas being a number 1 defenseman, just in so much as he just was scoring goals in a way we weren't expecting him to. And that's not why Radko Gudas is on your team, but he does have that dynamic a little bit in so much as yeah, dude, he's been a good player for a long time and he can put up points in certain situations. Again, it's like you take Ryan Reeves. Ryan Reeves would be the MVP of every beer league in the world. And this is a guy who actually has more projectable offensive upside than some of those other guys, like you were saying. And so I think, I like you're saying with the highlight clips, like you're saying, a lot of the highlight clip stuff that I liked were passing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even him shooting. It was him making good passes cross ice. Like there was one where he's coming down the left and there's a guy streaking down the right wing to basically make a backdoor bank shot in. And he just makes a slick little pass through this lane right to this dude. And again, he's young, he's 17-ish. He's got an opportunity to continue to grow, but he's also got an opportunity to continue to fill out. I saw something online about someone being like, is he the Norwegian Nick Kronwall?
He's already 6'2", 201 at under
right.
17.
That's what I'm saying. If he's 6'3", 215, 220, that's a serious that's a serious body. That is a mean body to have to play against. And you add in that he's an above average skater for his size. You add in that he has the vision and the playmaking skills to be more offensively inclined than you think. And what you're starting to do is put together a thing where you're like, yeah, this is a guy who's going to be in the top 4, and we know exactly what we're going to be asking him to do, but he's not going to be limited, like you were saying. We both love Braden Schneider. I don't think either of us expect Braden Schneider to ever hit 20 points in a season. This is a guy who could hit 25, 30 points in a season down the line.
Yeah.
Especially with the talent of forwards that it seems like Anaheim is continuing to create. Again, maybe it is he puts a season where he's got 5 goals, 5 primary assists, and 10 secondary assists.
He's going to put up 300 hits with that too. So.
But that's exactly right. He's going to be able to pitch in a way that is not what you're asking him to do, but he is capable of doing.
I think the one thing about it, we've talked about this a lot, and something the Ducks have needed in having a physical presence, and we talked about it more on the enforcer side of things and debating that, but you look at it in a sense with the Rangers, and one comparison for Solberg has been Jacob Trouba, but a cleaner Jacob Trouba with a bit more to his offensive game. If you can get that, right, if you can get a cleaner, smarter Jacob Trouba, for lack of a better description,
right,
that creates fear in the opposition to have a guy out there who can do that. And the big thing that I am very excited about with Solberg is his ability to close down opponents and make these hits in European ice. It's very scary for what he could do on smaller ice surface.
Smaller American ice,
to be able to close these guys down and some of the punishing hits that he's going to put out there. So I really like this pick. This is a guy, I think, if he didn't play in Norway, if he was Swedish and was playing in the SHL, is a guy that had a shout for the top 15, potentially make his way into the top 10. But because of the lack of data for scouting in Norway, whether the competition is up to snuff or not in their men's league in comparison to other leagues, I think that hurt him a little bit, and that's why he fell. And then obviously some concerns from some teams with the rest of his game. But this is a kid that, let's say he plays the whole year in Sweden next year and does well, could easily jump right into the lineup and have an immediate impact. No adjustment period beyond adjusting to North American ice. And he did pretty well. The theme for the Ducks, I feel like since Verbeek has taken over, they love their late risers. They love their late risers at the end of the draft. McTavish was a late riser. You've got Leo Carlsson being a late riser and jumping in over Adam Fantilli and what he did at the end of the year. You obviously have Beckett Seneca being a key point to that. And then Solberg was great all year, but again, playing in Norway, that was hurting him a bit, and he was kind of projected for like a late first. Then he goes to the World Championships with Norway, playing against NHL players, and he was potentially the best shutdown defenseman at that tournament, which is saying something. Playing for a team that isn't that great, right? And I know the World Championships, we've had our say about them in the competition level, but that's the hardest competitions he's ever played against. And he did not look
acquitted himself.
He didn't
well.
look out of place, and not only that, like he looked exceptional, and that rose his stock significantly. And obviously, the Ducks loved what they saw from him at the tournament. They had a good reason to have a lot of eyes on that tournament because they had a few players playing there as well. So I don't know what the trend is, and we'll see if it pans out for the Ducks. But they do seem to love these guys. They do seem to love these guys that turn it on, either in big moments or late on in the season. And so far with Leo Carlsson, that seems like it's panned out. With Mason McTavish, it seems like it's panned out, and remains to be seen for Beckett Seneca and Stian Solberg. But on the basis of fit and potential, there's not much better I feel like you can do with these top two picks that they have.
Yeah, I think, again, like, which we're going to get into with the next pick just because of who was taken and where. The only thing you could ask for him to do differently is hold his stick the other way. That's the only thing that you could say, God, I wish he did this. If he held his stick the other way, this is the best pick in the draft. Because of how the way he has the opportunity to impact games at the next level. And yeah, I just, it's very exciting. And we saw Brandon Nygaard, who was Norwegian from Norway. Yeah, that's right. I'm forgetting. I don't know. What, it doesn't matter.
Well, so Nygaard played in Sweden, so that's the difference, I think, why it didn't hurt him.
No, but I just mean more of like, this is a guy who's playing with players who are of a quality they should be able to make an impact in World Championships for the next few years. They're going to have players who can be impactful. And again, there's a lot of projection to that as far as, everybody kind of needs to hit their stride. But I think the other thing is that I think is really interesting about Solberg, and we'll move on after this, is the micro stats and the underlying numbers that elite prospects use. They have him being tracked at 5v5 by Lassie Allen, who's one of their European scouts. His offense rates out significantly higher than his transition or defensive game, and he is being drafted for his defensive game. So on a minutia level, he has an ability to contribute offensively in a meaningful way on a microstat level. He's not going to be your first pick necessarily to rush the puck up the ice, but when you have the puck at the other end, he's going to be able to link plays together. He's going to be able to make good reads. The projection here is very positive and very excitable. And again, if you're taking a pick at 3-23 and you're swinging on big upside, I have no
big
problem
upside
with this.
and organizational fit and need, I think, right? So
yeah.
Now that brings us, unfortunately, to pick number 35, where it's not so much the player they took.
This has nothing to do with. I want to be very clear here. This has absolutely nothing to do with the player that was taken. This has to do with the player that went after him in the draft and how me and you feel about our prospect pool.
Yeah, so
obviously, we trust the scouts more than we trust ourselves.
Exactly.
We trust their ability to build a team and all this stuff. Martin Madden has done a very good job. He's got a long track record of doing a good job at spotting talent, building a prospect pool. But boy, like we said with Solberg, it would be nice to have a defenseman who held his stick the other way.
And played the same
Charlie Ellick,
type of game that we were
right.
talking about, yeah.
Charlie Ellick going the pick after Lucas Pettersson is philosophically frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's...
So I just wanted to lay that groundwork before we have this conversation.
Yeah, no, it was a major bummer because you're sitting there at that pick. He was obviously a guy that we really wanted to come in because, again, he's, for his size, 6'3", 198, I believe is what he's listed as. He was listed as one of the better skaters in the draft. The Elite Prospects gave him a 6.5, and that's rare for a player of his size. Then he got a 7.5 in physicality. He was listed as the 5th hardest hitter, 2nd best shutdown defenseman, 2nd best neutral zone defender, and a really good transition numbers. And when you look at his underlying numbers for this year, you can just see the fit compared to Caden Gooley, compared to Braden Schneider. We talked about the Ducks needing a right shot shutdown defender who can skate, and EJ Emery and Charlie Ellick were the two guys we're looking at. Of course, EJ went before the Ducks had another pick. So Ellick being there at 35, you felt like listen, if you walk away with Seneca and Solberg and then you bring Charlie Ellick into you've hit all your needs in your first 3 picks, you can do whatever the hell you want after this, and it doesn't matter. So that's the bummer for me, I think, is not taking him, just because you can see the fit of where he kind of would have worked in there and how it would have looked for the Ducks to bring in a player like that. I don't want to harp on it too long because I do want to talk about Lucas Pettersson and who they did end up getting at 35. And I do think he's a perfectly fine player. I don't think there's anything wrong with him. I think it's a good spot for him to go. I think, again, a little bit, of a late riser. He had a great season in the J20 for Modo, over a point per game, 1.3 points per game. So his production was great in what is essentially Sweden's junior league. Had a good under 18, which helped to rise his draft stock a little bit. Elite Prospects had him ranked 41. So, again, Ducks took him a little bit earlier than where they had him ranked, but it's not a reach by any means. Played 5 games in the SHL, 0 points, but I'm assuming, I haven't looked, probably 3rd or 4th line minutes. That's usually how it goes when they get a late promotion, especially because he's not coming from the Allsvenskan, he's coming from the J20. Likely his opportunities weren't significantly high. But he's a very good skater, and then he's the typical Swedish center after that. He's just kind of pretty good at everything else, right? He's just nothing stand out really beyond the skating and the offensive skill at this point.
Yeah, and I think, to me, the thing about Pettersson that, and again, we've had these conversations, and the people who do this stuff always make a point to say player comps are fraught with peril because it's hard to know how guys are going to develop, and mentally guys aren't always the same. You know what I mean? The way they read the game and stuff is different, things like that. But again, we trust Martin Madden, and you and I trust Elite Prospects. The 2 players specifically mentioned as comps, Martin Madden said, we think he's William Karlsson. We see a lot of in him of what we saw in William Karlsson. And remember, the Ducks drafted William Karlsson. This isn't them being like, oh, that's a good player on that other team. It would be cool if we had one. This is, we drafted that guy. And we see a lot of the same thing in him. An Elite Prospect doing their shades of thing, because they don't ever want to say this is who this is, say Michael Backlund. Look, I will sit here and laugh about the fact that it took Michael Backlund until he was 34 to win a game in Anaheim forever. That's funny as shit. Michael Backlund's a really good player. Anybody who's watched Ducks hockey can tell you Michael Backlund is a very good player. He was an effective... He's probably the line. I don't know which way you want to go, but he's the line in the idea between a top 6 and a middle 6, right? Like, if you're like, what's the difference between a top 6 and a middle 6 center? I think your opinion of Michael Backlund is the line. And if he's some version of either of those or both of those, That's huge. That's a lot to like about his game. And then you add in the speed dynamic that he brings to the team. We have seen it on this team, the need to get faster. The idea that in a couple years, he's probably a 3, 4, 5 years kind of guy, just
where he's at in his development right now.
Based on his development and things like that. But to just add that speed into the middle six, potentially as a center, even possibly as a winger, who's fast, he's toolsy, like, you know what I mean? His thing are his fleet of foot, toolsy, and vision. Yeah, man. A guy with a good ability to read the game, quick feet, and like you said, just good at pretty much everything. That's a very meaningful and potentially impactful player. This is a guy that Martin Madden said he believes has legitimate top six impact upside. This is not a player that he thinks is like, we're saying he has top six upside because we're trying to sell him after the draft. This is like, we really think he could be something special. And even if he isn't, what we think his like overwhelming likelihood of turning into is still a really meaningful player. If he's a third line center behind Carlson and McTavish, the Ducks are going to be in a very good spot. And you made this comp to me, and I got mad at you, but I also think it's correct, this is another version of drafting Isaac Lindstrom.
Yep.
It's that type of stylistic player who can do these different things and provide a dynamic farther down the lineup that frees up the top of the lineup. He's kind of the Swedish Nathan Gaucher in that sense, where Gaucher's a bit more of a classic hard-nosed Canadian center. He's your classic skilled, structured, responsible Swedish center. If either one of those guys, God forbid both, hit, the Ducks are in a really good spot. I like this pick. I like this player. Again, the frustration with this pick is entirely philosophical about where the Ducks prospect pool is and things that this Ducks prospect pool could use. So that is the only thing I think me and you were frustrated by with this pick, and that has nothing to do with Pettersson. And at this point, the draft is over, so none of it matters. Wishing him all the best, hoping he becomes this guy. Would love to be like, oh, the idea that we wanted to pick Charlie Elick over this guy is silly. I hope that is where we are in 6 years. That would be phenomenal. We will see.
Yeah, I don't think it's the worst thing. And again, like we said, I think we totally understand the pick, like the player. It's just one of those situations where you like a guy a lot more that was at that spot. Unfortunately, they went a different. It's at least one every year, if not multiple, right?
Yeah.
Listen, I'm gonna let you take this next one because this is where you got your points from. At number 66, the Ducks dipped back into one of their favorite places lately to draft players out of the QMJHL and took Maxime. I'm going to say Massé.
Massé, I think. I mean, you're a lot closer to them than I am, man.
Maxime Massé from the
Maxime Massé.
Saguenay.
First of all, we don't spend enough time. I think I said this on the last thing when we did our draft. Chicoutimi is such a fun word to say. It's just such a fun word to say. He's just... All right, I gotta find it, because, like, my brain is...
I really like this one, man. Like, for where you get him, Elite Prospects had him ranked 54. There were a lot of people that had him ranked higher. There were some people that had him ranked lower, and that was just kind of the case of this little range for this part of the draft. And I guess it's like that every year because he has some things he does really well, and then he has some major concerns. The skating being one of it, the hockey sense, the passing not really being there. But the one thing he does well, he's physical, plays hard, he shoots the puck well. He's a sniper.
Yeah, and I think, again... When we were doing the draft, the thing that attracted me to him was he hits, he shoots, he's a right wing. He's a natural right wing.
Right shot, too, yeah.
You can obviously move things around, guys can play offsides, things like that. But he's a natural right shot, right wing goal scorer. That's what he's going to do. He's going to play. He's going to be on the forecheck. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to use his body. He's already a pretty big kid, 6'1", 180. And he's going to get pucks on net. I think a really interesting way to say this is maybe he's Frank Petrano, but a little bit bigger.
Mhm.
I love that. I'm super happy about that.
Well, his shades of is great. His shades of Brendan Saad. Like, that's the type of player that you love
Right.
to have.
Right, and that is like Brandon Saad is a classic top 9 forward in that I can play him on the first line, I can play him on the third line. He's going to do the same thing every time. Even if he doesn't hit his full peak, again, if you told me there is a world where down the line we're looking at him and Lucas Pettersson playing on a line together, that's a good fit. You got a smart, skilled, fast center who can read the game well and get the puck to a guy like Massé, who's going to get himself to the center. He's going to get himself around the net. He's going to put the puck on the net. This is not a guy who's going to wait to shoot. He is going to provide a dynamic that the Ducks need. He feels similar to the Colangelo pick in a sense. I don't think his shot's probably as heavy and as overwhelming, but I do think he is going to provide that kind of gritty middle six right wing goal scoring potential where he could pop for 30 goals 1 year, likely a 20 to 25 goal scorer. Again, and this is if everything breaks well. We're talking, top 10 percentile outcome here. He's a guy who has the opportunity. Let me say it this way. If he's Matt Bolesky, we're in a really good spot. If this is a guy where he plays for the Ducks on his ELC, he plays for the Ducks on his first contract, and the Ducks have to let him walk because they can't afford to keep him when he hits free agency, that's perfect. That is exactly what you want from this guy, is he's going to force your hand, and you are either going to have to move someone else or you're going to have to let him walk because you're not going to quite be able to afford him and keep the rest of your team intact. If he's Matt Bolesky, we're in a really good spot. His skating is going to need a little bit of work. I think the Ducks' development infrastructure is going to be able to help him develop some of that hockey sense, reading plays a little bit better. Just being around players is going to be good for him. I think he's going to play a simple and clean game. He's going to be an F1. He's going to be down below the goal line a lot, and he's going to be around the net. Are we saying maybe that this is a slightly less defensively responsible for their age group Max Comtois? Maybe. Maybe that's exactly what he is, right? It's that type of player, but it's a guy who's going to be able to potentially have an impact because of the style he plays, and he's not afraid to shoot.
I
don't know what more you want from an Anaheim Duck right now.
No, and I will say this. I have a lot of faith when the Ducks scout and draft from the QMJHL because they just seemed to have an understanding and like to dip into that league and have more confidence dipping into that league more than some other teams seem to. And we look at that recently, what is it, 2022, 3 straight picks, Gauthier, Warren, Luneau. Luneau panned out significantly so far, or at least beyond where they had taken him. Warren looks like he's trending in the right direction. Gauthier had a pretty decent rookie season for San Diego, so he looks like he's trending in the right direction as well. And I think the one thing, too, that they love to look for in players, especially Luneau was kind of this guy in being a high draft pick in the QMJHL, one of the top players in his rookie year, and then the draft year was a little bit of a down. Massé kind of has that similar thing because, listen, this guy has some pedigree behind him. He was QMJHL and CHL Rookie of the Year in his D-1 season. Do you want me to name off the last few CHL Rookies of the Year?
I would love it if you did that, my friend.
So we'll go start back at 2013, 2014. This is CHL Rookies of the Year. So this includes QMJHL, OHL, and WHL. 2013-2014, Nikolai Ehlers. 2014-2015, Alex DeBrincat. 2015-2016, Alex Nylander. 2016-2017, Nico Hischier. 2017-2018, Alexis Lafreniere. 2018-2019, Quentin Byfield. 2019-2020, Shane Wright. 2021-2022, Braden Yeager. 2022-2023, Maxim Massé. And then this last year was Gavin McKenna, who was an exceptional status player in the WHL.
I was going to say, who's probably the first overall pick in, 2 years?
Exactly. He's a 15-year-old playing in the WHL. So,
yeah. Well, here's the
yeah.
other thing. He won the Michael Bossy Trophy awarded to the QMJHL's best professional prospect.
Yeah, top prospect this year.
And here's the thing I want to read. He scored around the net by driving there to tip shots and collect rebounds. Was the wrister in the middle of the slot and a powerful one-timer at the end of the game. Wrote Elite Prospects lead scout David St. Louis in a January game report. His shot is still as dangerous as ever. The question is it good enough on its own to earn him a first power play job? I'm not sure at this stage. You know what I'm not worried about? The Ducks' first power play unit.
Mm-hmm. This guy is a perfect
if
middle
he's
six.
Pushing for the first power play, we
Something
have
went wrong.
done everything right.
No. Well, yes,
I would
if
argue
he's pushing
something
for it.
went
But
wrong.
I meant if we're relying on
Sure,
him
I
to
see
be
the point
that,
you're
yeah.
making. Yeah. Oh, look, if we're relying on him, it's a problem. But if he's pushing these guys for that spot, that's very promising. You know what I mean? If we're in the middle of January and the Ducks power play is like 0 for 20, and fans are like, why are we putting Massey on the power play? He makes things happen. That's a good thing. And I just, again, like, the dynamic that he's going to bring to this team, I think, is the dynamic that he brings to this prospect pool and that he could potentially bring to this team is very exciting. And there's a lot here to be excited about. And, you know, again, he led his team in goals the last 2 years in Chicoutimi. There is a lot here to like. Yes, he was drafted a little later. He obviously wasn't a first-round draft pick, so there's obviously some question marks. He's got good speed. He can keep up, but his skating isn't great. If you work with him, if he's already able to just keep up with the pace of play and you can continue to improve his skating, that's a lot to like. There's a lot of upside built into him because the floor seems to be fairly high.
Yep. I do think
that's a great idea.
I do think the issues with his skating are a little bit overblown as well. I don't think they're as bad as some people are reporting. I think Elite Prospects has it right, putting him at about a 5.5 would be where he'd be out of 8. Like, it's not bad. It's about average, maybe slightly below average. But some of the reports out there and why some people had him ranked in lower than where the Ducks took him is because the concerns and the major concerns with his skating and his stride and his skating structure. But I don't think it's that bad, and honestly, would not surprise me if he comes out, be a better Chicoutimi team next year and scores 50 goals in the QMJHL. I think that'd be great for his development, and I think he could be a 50-goal, 90 to 100-point player in the QMJHL next year and then start looking at making the next step beyond that. And he just projects really nicely as a right shot, right wing option in the Ducks middle six in the future because he's got all the tools to make it there. It's just whether some of that translates to the next level. More so, I guess my concern is the hockey sense, but I think you can get around that and kind of teach that and help develop them into the right system and kind of get past that a little bit, right? And if you have him and use him specifically as a physical, fringe second line, third line sniper, you can get away with that a little bit, right? Where he doesn't need to kind of have an elite hockey sense. He's not going to be a top line guy. He's going to go out there and contribute for 12, 13 minutes a night. You can kind of get away with that and mitigate some of that loss. So I like it, man. I think if you get Charlie Elick, where you get Lucas Pettersson, I think it's an A+ with those first few picks. I think just getting Lucas Pettersson instead, I think it's probably an A-. I still like it. I still love the picks and the swings that they took at that point.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just want to read this real quick, from Martin Madden. Maxim is a complete player. He's really smart, he's competitive, and he's got elite hands. He needs to work on his quickness and agility a little bit coming out of tight spaces. If the criticism of his skating is potentially largely built around his explosiveness from a standstill in the corners and along the walls or breaking out of, I don't want to say huddles, but like groups, you know what I mean? We can fucking work with that.
Yep.
You can pass that. Literally, you can beat that with passing. You can beat that with off-puck movement. There are ways for that to work well. Again, there's a lot to like here.
All right, next pick was 2 picks after. And the Ducks, like I said earlier, they had a little bit of a theme of taking guys who can either put up the highlight reel play or like to play physical and just absolutely terrify the opposition. Ethan Precision is the latter for sure. One of the most physical, dominating and scary to play against players in the OHL. He's a center, 6'2", 187 pounds. He scored top 5 in almost the majority of the combine when it comes to like physical abilities. He's kid who's in great shape for where he's at in his development, and really just tough kid to play against. And I think the one thing with this, it's a bit of a reach because Elite Prospects had him at 101 and the Ducks took him at 68. I think the thing to look at with this is North Bay was a very good, very deep team this year, and I think he was thrust into a role, and it's one of the things we've seen, and one of, I guess, the kind of negative impacts of the NTDP program lately, and evaluating guys like EJ Emery and guys like Cole Iserman, and being labeled a lot of times as one-dimensional and not having a lot of other facets to their game, is that program kind of is very role dependent, and they thrust players into specific roles and have them play specific roles to a T. I know every team is like that to some extent, but I feel like Precision was kind of thrust into being the physical third, fourth line power forward for this team. And I do think there's a little bit more there to his offense that with some of the overagers leaving North Bay this upcoming season, that he could potentially get himself into a better position to contribute more offensively. So it'd be really interesting to watch him next year and see how they developed at the base floor level. A kid that, if he makes the NHL, is going to be a really tough pain in the ass to play against, to play on the fourth line. Is going to throw the body around. He's a right shot center. He can probably, when you think he gets to the NHL, is a center wing type player. Sam Carrick potentially type player, but obviously bigger. That versatile player. He can kind of move in and around the lineup and play 40 to 50 games in a season. Matchup dependent. So I do like it. I do like it for fit. The Ducks don't have a player like this in their system right now, and if you do think, and from where they took him, I think they think there's more there. Then why not? You take a swing there, and you hope that when he gets a better opportunity to showcase his talents a little bit more, that you're right, and that it was just the role that he was put in that was kind of limiting that production and that ability from showcasing the rest of his talents.
So I want to ask you a question. I would say the conservative / cynical version of what this is to me is they are drafting for a top, and this is going to sound very stupid, but let me say it this way. They are drafting a player who could become an elite fourth line player. How do you feel about that at 68?
I don't hate it, because I personally think they take him here because he had flashes of skill every now and then, but again, very role dependent. So I think they draft him here thinking there's more there, and that he could become a bottom six or potentially a third line power forward who can play at the center wing. And I think that's what they're drafting and hoping for here. Otherwise, you make this pick 5th or 6th round, where he likely probably would have gone. And if no other team thought the same way the Ducks did, and you could, draft for him being an elite fourth line player there. I think at the where they draft him, where they take him, is that they hope there's an upside there, and they feel that there could be an upside there, and that the floor is he's an elite fourth line player. So I think it's a mix there, is that on a very, minimal basis, and a floor is they think they're getting an elite fourth line player, and they think, well, hey, we think there could be more there. Let's see where it is, and we're going to take him at 68 just to make sure we get him. So I'm fine with it because, again, I think the scouting staff knows what they're doing, and why not take a swing, right, and see what you can get and see if you get a little bit more. And I think organizationally he's a bit different than what we have, so I'm fine adding a bit of a different profile there.
I think that's the part of it for me that I think I like, because I think you can look, you need fourth line guys, and maybe there's an argument that the best fourth line guys are first line guys that didn't work out, but that's not really how the world works. And so the idea of drafting someone who's got good speed and who's just got a nastiness to his game, um, I think is very exciting. Um, and so I think we don't have anybody like him in our system, and we think he can be the classic superstar in your role type player. I think this is a good pick. I think it's a fun pick. It's an interesting pick, and like you said, they probably see more uh, potential there that led to them feeling comfortable taking this pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't have.
I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all.
I don't have a ton to say about him because again, it is all projection. It is with any prospect. It's very projection based on his role and what he could be in, and very limited upside beyond a bottom six forward. But if you're thinking upside and taking a swing and drafting a player for what they could become and getting a steal in the draft, the Ducks always seem to walk away with one of these. I would say that's probably who they got at 79 in Terrence Smith, in an organization they're fairly familiar with lately because it's where Olin Zellweger came from in the Everett Silvertips. They got Terrence Smith, 6 foot 176-pound defender, just full of offensive potential. Skating's a bit of a question. Physically, at 6'1", it's not really there. He's kind of a string being 6'1", 176 at this point. But when we talk about flashy players and highlight reel players that we were talking about earlier, Beckett Seneca probably being the flashiest of the forwards available, or at least in that conversation. Terrence Smith certainly has compiled probably the flashiest highlight reel of any of the defenders available, which is saying something when you take him at 79.
Right.
Elite Prospects said Makar-esque moves and what he was being able to pull off. I mean, and it shows in the ratings. They give him a 5.5 in shooting, 6 in passing, 6.5 in puck handling, and 6 in hockey sense. I watched some of the highlights. I'll be completely honest, hadn't heard of this kid, wasn't on my radar when he got picked, and looking into some of the video and the highlights from him and the scouting report specifically from Elite Prospects. I mean, man, it looks fun. That's probably the best way to explain it. He looks like a fun player, one that has the potential to be the steal of the draft, as Elite Prospects put it, that he's one of the best upside swings outside of the top 20, and to get that at 79 for a player they had ranked 42nd, it's one that could pan out very well for the Ducks, and it's on brand, right? Getting a defenseman in this late second into the third round that ends up being significantly better than what you expected.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I misread your tone. Yeah, 100%. I think. Look, man, if nothing else, I think this, as I understand it, is a player that Glenn Cochran was very vocal about liking, and this seems to be a pick that they made for him. Glenn Cochran was the first thing Pat Verbeek talked about when he got up to the podium to pick Seneca. They all wore the GC patches. He was a very well-respected voice in that organization and in that scouting department. Cochran said he felt like he was a little similar to Josh Mahura. Madden said, I think Mahura is a little bit better physically, or a little farther along physically, but in the way they see the ice, the way they kind of play to make life easy on forwards is very similar. I mean, we all saw it with Josh Mahura. There were flashes of him where you were like, oh, this could be something. He had a good year when he was able to play in Florida. You know what I mean? He was a contributor on their bottom pair. And I don't know that I ever saw the kinds of flashes from Josh Mahura that I saw in some of these clips. Because again, like you, this was kind of someone that I kind of missed. And seeing the highlights on him, you're like, wait, this guy went 79th? Mm-hmm. Like, he looks dynamic with the puck on his stick. And, maybe you chalk that up to it being, juniors and things like that, but it's not nothing. And his ability to manipulate other players by using his puck handling and his hockey sense. Again, this is something we've said 1,000 times. If you're going to take a swing on smart players.
Yep.
That's the way to go for it. And if you're taking a smart player who's got the ability to potentially add depth offense, again, if he's a 6'1" version of Matt Grzelcyk, we're very happy. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a great player to have in your organization. This pick seems like an upside pick. Like you said, Elite Prospect says he's got some of the best upside outside the top 20. Again, I don't know that we need to overly drill down here other than to say this is a really smart pick on a smart player who can do cool things with the puck on his stick, and it'll be about the organization helping him develop his skating that he's able to be effective at the next level.
Yeah, that's the thing, is if he works on the skating, then the rest of the base of his game is there. It's the physicality. I think that will come with size and weight and putting on some muscle, as we see with a lot of these guys who are, he's got the height, so it's just about putting on the weight and then adding that physical side to his game, because there's just a lot of focus on being flashy, and that comes a lot of times at the junior level, but it's not flashy for just the sake of being flashy. Like you'd mentioned, he's a very smart player, and he knows when to use it and how to use it effectively, so that will translate well to the next level. And I think that physicality will just come from being in a league where he has to play more physical, because he will have the size to do it. And then it'll become with picking and choosing your moments, which I think he's smart enough to do. So it's just about that skating in terms of how high of a ceiling he has and how far along that comes. But yeah, he's going to be a fun one to watch. And the Ducks have a great track record, of course, of drafting defensemen from the WHL. You look at Shea Theodore, you look at Josh Mahura, like you'd mentioned, obviously Olin Zellweger from the same team. So you have some faith that Brandon Montour, I believe, was also. No, he was college, I think, was he not? Or was he WHL? I can't remember.
No, I'm pretty sure he was WHL.
I can't remember. But either way, like, there's a track record here of taking. I don't know. I feel like I'm
going to look it up right now.
I remembered his path being a bit different. But either way, there's a track record of taking these defensemen in the second and third rounds and it paying dividends for the Ducks, and these guys being able to develop and play well. And it's one that, beyond Seneca, he's going to be a really interesting one to watch next year to see how he progresses and how well he can actually do. All right, what's the verdict on our boy Brandon Montour? Did he play WHL or did he play USHL?
Played for UMass.
Oh yeah, so I figured he played college, man.
UMass. Yeah, he played for Brantford Eagles, the GOJHL, and then the USHL, and then he went to the NCAA. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he played for Waterloo and UMass. And then the next year he was in San Diego, and then he's been pretty much an NHL player since then.
Now a hefty contract.
Stanley Cup
champion and a hefty payday.
The boy got paid fat.
Yeah, with the Seattle Kraken. Good for him, man. It's nice to see him do well.
Always liked him, man. Always loved how feisty he was. Always, whatever. We can talk about all times. We're going to have all summer to talk about all times. The next he's coming up as a player I'm fascinated by. I think is a player that shows a little creativity in organizational thinking and a little creativity in, because like you said, we definitely saw this, that they were kind of prioritizing size, prioritizing physicality. Boy, this player ain't either of those fucking things. 5'10" speed demon winger Alexander Blaze. I'm really excited about this player. I think this is a player who has the ability to provide something to the team that it doesn't necessarily have, as far as high-end speed in the bottom six. Maybe he's able to move into a middle six role. I think more than likely, though, this is a guy that you're looking at competing and contributing from a middle six row. A bottom six role. I'm talking way too fast. And I just think it's good to take different types of players, right? That's something we've talked about over the course of this draft review is having a diversity of prospect style. This is a guy who just doesn't stop moving. He's just a mover. And we were talking about it a little bit with Euros and talking about some of the problems that England was having and how some of the issues with England, like we love Kobe Mainoo obviously as United fans, and one of the things that you notice with him is he doesn't stop moving his feet. And you see that in the NHL. There are players who are effective because they don't stop skating. They don't wait for the play to come to them. They don't wait for players to move. They create the time and space and opportunity for themselves by being active and aggressive consistently, and aggressive in a stylistic way. Obviously, he's not someone who's going to be aggressive in a more traditionally physical way, maybe like Maxime Massé is going to be. But this is a guy who's going to put pressure on other teams, constantly put guys on the back foot, and provide a depth speed element that I think has shown over time to be an incredibly valuable asset in a bottom six role.
Yeah, I like this one. He got drafted around where they had them ranked, but self-admittedly, EP in their assessment of him said they ranked him here and not higher for two reasons: his size, and not specifically his height. He's not small; he's 5'10", so he's kind of right on that borderline. He's 154 pounds.
He's 5'10", he's 5'9".
Yeah,
Let's be
he's
honest.
154 pounds.
But he
too.
could be 5'10" in a year.
So
he's a kid.
he's very small and slight for not for that level, but for anything beyond that, right? And then he also has a late birthday, so he's almost already 18 at the draft. So those were the two main reasons that they kind of put him down a little bit farther. Otherwise, I think you're looking at a player who's probably ranked in the 70 to 80 range. Is that late kind of third round or into the mid third round projection for him. So again, the things working against him isn't necessarily anything that he's doing. It's just his size and his age and why they didn't rank him, higher than other players. So that's the good thing, I guess you can say. And when you're looking at where he's ranked and where he was taken, is it's nothing outside of his control. He played really well, produced at a very good click, 84 points in 68 games. Very shifty, creative player. And if he can continue to improve on it, and you look at maybe a 100-point player next year and add some size to him, and if he gets to the NHL at 5'11", 180, then I think should have no problem being an impact player if the rest of his game can translate to the next level, right? Because he plays a fast-paced game, and he's smart enough and has some good creativity and playmaking ability that you could see him being kind of a fit, like you said, on a third line with a team in the NHL. So I like it. Again, not much what you can expect to get in the fourth round. You kind of hope that you swing on some of these upside picks that they pan out.
All right, Eddie. Now comes the one thing. I would say over the last few years, two things that we have learned that the Ducks love to do is they always take a goalie, which they didn't do this year. First time in, I think, 5 or 6 years they haven't drafted a goalie. But they also do one other thing. They love to find an overager.
Yep.
And this next player is an overager. And boy, he is a very funny overager to me because he's such a big kid, 6'4", 200 pounds. He really looks like he got held back a year. And, he's the sixth grader hanging out with all the fourth graders. Austin Bernovic out of the USHL. His two little tags, he's considered a C prospect by Elite Prospects. His two little tags are vision and brain. His passing 5.5, hockey sense 5, shooting 5, puck handling 5, physical 5. And then we get to the reason why I would say he probably wasn't drafted last year, which is that his skating is poor to the point of a 3.5 rating by Elite Prospects. That is a concerning score. But as Martin Madden said in his blurb, he scored 40 goals in the USHL. Not a lot of guys score 40 goals in the USHL. He seems to be a smart enough player. He's almost, already 19. So it's clearly, in a weird way, an upside pick, but an upside pick in a way that you're looking at maybe this guy can be a a bottom six contributor and kind of help get more out of some of these other guys. I also think this is a profile of player that, again, like we said, if you're going to take a risk on a smarter player. And he could be the kind of guy that you're like, in 7 or 8 years, you're like, he fell that far? That's weird. He should have been taken higher than that. There's a lot to like about that game. So I'm, I don't have a ton to say about this guy, but it is certainly a pick that I can understand why the team decided to take the risk.
Yeah, again, like you said, that the Ducks always like to take an overager, and I mean Sidorov was the last one I believe they took, and that's looking pretty good so far in terms of when you look at the season that he had last year. So again, when you take a swing on production, and him, like you'd said, being a 40-goal scorer in the USHL, the production's there, whether he's a year older or a couple of years older than these guys or not, he still is producing. And then the package that comes in, the size and physicality of a player like this, you could see the fit in the organization to bring in a player like that. The Ducks have drafted a lot of small, shifty forwards over the last few drafts, and even in this draft as well, with the guy we just talked about, Alexander Blaze. So to bring in a guy like this, it just kind of rounds out the players that you brought in this year, and helps kind of flesh out the prospect pool a little bit more. So yeah, a guy not heavily reported on. That's what you're going to see with most of these later picks. But when you look at, again, kind of the numbers and this, the profile of this player, you can see why they kind of took a swing on him.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just kind of cruising some of the game reports here. It seems to be a lot of, he's a smart guy who knows his limitations, and those limitations are a problem. So it'll be interesting to see if the Ducks can get a hold of him and help him improve that skating. And if they can, then yeah, maybe there's something special here. So again, like you said, it's an upside swing, and I don't think that's a problem at fucking, what was he drafted, like 90 something, 100 something?
Oh yeah, it's like 160 something, I think. So
yeah, like I'm, again, you're not going to tell me that taking an upside swing on a 6'4" winger with good vision is a problem at 100 and whatever the hell.
Yeah, and the only thing left, I guess, for them to draft would have been a right shot defenseman, but they didn't do that. They went and drafted another lefty with Daryls Lujanskis from Latvia, 6'2", 192-pound defenseman. He was not a overager, which is good. He was actually one of the younger players in the draft, just over 17, which is another trend that the Ducks have liked to do with at least one of their picks. Connor Viston was the one that I remember most recently, but they always like to take not only an overager, but one of the younger players in the draft, which is something I always like. That's why I mentioned in our draft preview looking at a guy like Lucas Fischer and bringing him in, just to take a swing on a guy who is essentially a year behind in development, that hopefully they progress and things move on a little bit further, and they break out at a later date than some of these guys. So I don't hate it. I always like for one of these kind of upside swings. He is Latvian, but he is playing in the Swedish development system, so played mostly in the J20 with Lucas Pettersson, so in that same league. Decent production, kind of a typical two-way defenseman, all-round game. So far at this point, nothing that really stands out, but he's got time, and it's a guy I like to see develop over the next couple of years and see how his game comes along. Because, again, being a just over 17, playing over 45 games in the J20, playing at the World Juniors, playing at the under 18s, he had a lot of games this year. So he's a guy that I think has some good potential to take a swing on with your last pick.
Yeah, 100%. I don't have a ton to say about this one. I just think, I think the Martin Madden part is really telling. We saw him play both in juniors in Sweden and with U18s with Latvia. There's just one hole in his game. He needs to get a little bit more mobile off of his pivots to defend better against speed, but he's got size, he's got strength, he's got really good hockey sense and really good hands. He can really shoot the puck, so we'll help him get better. Fuck, man, take a project. Why not?
Yep.
He said his favorite, like he says in the Elite Prospects thing, his favorite player is Rasmus Dahlin. He's a player he likes to watch and wants to try to do more of. He said, I'm an offensive defenseman who can play like a two-way defenseman. Fine, great, that's awesome. if his biggest thing is just some lateral mobility issues, and not really necessarily lateral mobility so much as just his ability to kind of swivel his hips a little bit, I think that's something you can work with. Again, he's very young. He's probably 3 weeks away from being in the next year's draft kind of a thing. And if he has a good D+1 year, maybe we're saying, wow, this is a player who would have gone significantly higher. Maybe this is a 4th or 3rd round pick in next year's draft. So again, this is what the Ducks do. These are the risks these are the swings you want to see these guys take. They're looking for smart players. They're looking for guys who have something they can offer. And the fact that there's Martin Madden just comes out and says for a 7th round pick, there's a hole in his game. There's a hole, one hole. That's exciting. That's optimistic. And again, the odds are this kid never touches the NHL ice outside of development camp.
Yep.
Maybe even preseason. But what they're telling you he could do and he can do and how he likes to play are reasons to take this kid with a 7th round pick. I don't have any issues. Again, I think me and you both feel very confident that this is a very good scouting staff. It's a very good development team. And by and large, the only issue we have with this year is they didn't take a single right shot defenseman.
Yeah, like I said, I think if you take Charlie Elick at 35, for me, we might as well give our grades for the draft. This is probably an A, like bordering A+, and the only reason I can't give it A+ is because there's probably a safer option like a Demidov at 3 that you could give it an A+. So I think all around, like A- for the draft, and barring
Feels right.
barring Elick being the only pick I would have taken over the rest of them, but they all have reasons for why they took them, and I think they're good reasons. And I think with the 2 picks you got at 3 and 23, great players with a lot of upside and great organizational fits, I think is the main 2 key factors.
I will say that I think I'll give this draft an A bordering on A+, because I think this was one of the more creative drafts we've seen from this front office. They traded up, they traded back, they took players with upside. They went after guys that they liked. And obviously everybody's going to say that that's what they're doing, but based on the way they're talking about this, based on the way the profiles read on elite prospects, we see why these are players that this front office was targeting. I think, again, you take Charlie Elick over Lucas Pettersson, and I am over the wall. Honestly, if they take Nate Miskey instead of Lujanskis, I think is how you're supposed to say his name. I don't, apologies to the kid. If they take Nate Miskey, because this is my luck, Eddie, all my favorite players who I like end up in the Sharks or the fucking Blackhawks. Yeah. Miskey went to the Sharks. If they take him, I'm through the roof, because again, physical guy, right-handed shot, right shot, heavy shot, a guy who you can work on and try to turn him into an NHLer over some time. I don't, again, like you said, there are probably safer picks at 3, but I actually appreciate taking a bolder pick, like we said at the very beginning, of when you look at the way that this team has been built through the first round of the draft over the last few years. I like taking 2 big swings like this. I think Solberg's probably a bit safer than a big swing. I think you're looking at someone who seems far more projectable, and Seneca is the big swing, but that's a good big swing to take, and I'm not going to be upset about it. So I think it's an A. I think it's definitely an A. I'd say probably 94, 95 for me.
Yeah, well, then we move in out of an A and A- in the draft to what's probably been an F in free agency so far.
So this is one of those things where I always kind of laugh about doing it on the pod, is because now we're in a situation where we're talking about talking.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Let's do this first. Hey, Eddie. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you heard, but the Ducks did a rebrand. Boy, that logo looks sweet,
I can't believe we didn't even... That didn't even cross...
Haven't talked
didn't
about
even
it,
cross my mind. That...
I've been thinking about it the whole time.
Yeah. Dude, I love it. The logo, I love. Now we have different feelings on the jerseys, but the logo is it's perfect, man. It's a perfect blend of past and present. I think it looks great. I think the little features and the little tweaks that they added to it really make it stand out and feel unique, even though it is in a sense a carbon copy from the Mighty Duck. The little things that they did add and the color accents that they put into it, it does make it feel fresh and new. I don't think there's a better choice that they could have went with, because it's a mix of everybody wanting something to do with the Mighty Ducks, but also being able to take this team into a new direction and into the future with a different and new modern look. So I love it, man. I have no tweaks, no changes, no anything for the logo. I love how it looks.
Yeah, I think the logo is beautiful. I like the sassy drag queen eyebrows on the new one. I think that's really fun. I like the way that they changed the sticks. I like the way that they incorporated the modern colors. Again, like you kind of alluded to, I have some thoughts about the jerseys. I don't love the orange shoulder yokes on the away jerseys. I wish those would have been all white. As up at the top. I'm not a huge fan of the sleeves. I don't like how high up the black comes on the sleeve. That's just a me thing, but I didn't like the sleeves on the last jersey. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm just an asshole. I think overall it's a success. I think the changing of the the font on the word marks, I think the subtle changes to the Duckfoot D logo that is now on the shoulders is great. The rebranding is a success. I know a lot of people miss the eggplant and jade, or the purple and teal, or whatever colors we're all calling it. Seems to change constantly. But again, I was having this conversation this weekend, and I was telling somebody that the Samuelis being in Orange County matters to them. And they want orange for Orange County. We saw that in the announcement video. They kept saying Orange Country. This is what it is. This is who we are. This is what it is. If the biggest argument you can make about why the ownership is annoying is because they're insistent on orange, I don't know what we're doing here. We've said it before, I love our ownership group. I think they're great. They've done a very good job of being involved when they need to be and hands off all the other times. They're investing money. They're investing money in the team. They're investing money in the organization. They're investing money in the OC Vibe project. They are trying to make this a real thing for the fans. They want it. And I am not an Angels fan, but God, when you look at the way the Angels treat their fans, it is so hard to not love everything about the way that this ownership group moves publicly and privately.
Yeah, I mean,
does it hurt that there's a building at UCLA named after Henry Samueli? Not at all, but it's cool. So
no, I mean, I do love everything about this rebuild. I think the story and everything that they put out behind it, it just makes a ton of sense to move in this direction. The old look we had was not great to begin with, but it was getting stale beyond belief at this point. And I think what they're able to do with this now, I do have issues with some of the things in the jerseys, but the issues I have, there's reasoning behind why they did them, so it's why I can kind of overlook it. Like with the orange, I don't like the black, but it's a nod to not only the jerseys we just came from, but the first jerseys we switched to from the Mighty Duck jerseys with that kind of colorway and style to it. So I get it. I understand why it's included. It makes sense. Now, I personally am more of a fan of the white than the oranges, just because I think it's more so because they look a bit newer. We haven't really seen that colorway other than we had, I think it wasn't a Stadium Series, but it was a third jersey that we had that was similar, right? Either this past year or the year before that.
The retro, the second retro jersey.
So I think the oranges look similar beyond the logo to some of the orange jerseys we've had in the past, which is probably why I'm not I don't hate it. I just don't like it as much. I do love the orange pants though, man. I think that's gonna look that's looking really sweet. I think they had orange helmets too, do they not?
Yeah, they did. I'm looking at the picture
Yeah.
right now.
So I think I've got a picture pulled up, but it's Terry and Cam not wearing helmets. So, but yeah, I like that they didn't go full orange with the gloves. That it's a mix of orange and black. I think full orange would have been two Golden Knights with the
Too
gold,
much, sure.
right? So I think it's going to look good. But I think the one thing, like, I don't mind the orange shoulders on the whites. I actually don't. I don't mind it. I think it ties in the jersey a little bit together. It helps accentuate the logo a little bit. So I don't know, man. I like
Yeah.
it. And
You want to say it's a framing thing? I
yeah.
dig it. I can
One
dig
thing
it.
I really like the subtlety is the orange outline for the numbers. I love that. I love how it looks. I think that looks really
Yeah,
sick.
somebody called it like a double drop shadow or something like
Yeah.
that. It looks good. I love that the font is Art Deco. That's cool as hell. And it's funny because the person who pointed out that it was Art Deco to me is a Kings fan, and I was like, I just saw the writing, and I was like, I just like the writing. It's just got a cool feel. Feels Orange County-ish, and they were like, feels Art Deco-y. And then I read the press release, and they're like, or the video or something, and they're like,
Yeah.
the font is inspired by California's Art Deco history. And I was like, yeah, well, that'll do it.
Yeah, you know the video
So-
where they removed Trevor Zegras out of, right? That video.
Don't. I still don't know how to feel about that. Because it seems so petty and so pointless, and I texted you about this yesterday. Am I overreacting? I probably am because I do that, but like the idea that somebody in the organization made a decision to take him out of a hype video
Yeah.
just feels incredibly petulant and a little embarrassing.
Yeah.
I am hoping it's something stupid and silly, or there were two versions of the video or something stupid. But again, if the only difference is Trevor Zegras isn't in it, I have questions, and it just...
The only other thing I've heard is
that-
it had something to do with, and I haven't watched the original. I don't even know if I can watch the original now, but it had something to do with an ugly duck comment that was made. But I don't know. I can't. There's nothing I can say to that because I can't find the original anymore. So that's the only other thing I've heard. But I don't see why that would cause an issue for them to remove it, and then also to remove it with no reasoning, especially when they know there's. Trevor Zegras has been central to a lot of trade rumors lately. That, again, they don't have to comment, but just at least a reasoning to why it was removed, or some sort of kind of nod to why he was specifically removed from the promotional videos, right? Like, it just doesn't sit well, especially when everybody's kind of concerned about his future with the Ducks, right? So,
Right. No, exactly. But yeah, the rebrand is, I think, an unmitigated success, an unqualified success. Unqualified, I think. Is
you know
what
what
I want there.
was really cool and interesting and a real nod to the future of the Ducks is Leo Carlsson was the centerpiece of these promotional videos, which was kind of cool to see.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. They really seemed to put the next gen foot forward, and I love that, man. I'm a big fan of that. So that's just a nice little pick me up in the middle of this before we talk about free agency, and then we get to do the thing that I love and hate doing at the same time, which is talking about talking.
Yeah.
You know what? You go, because I don't even know how to get into this conversation, because I'm just going to get.
So are we talking about the lack of doing anything, or do you want to talk about the other moves that other teams made first?
Let's start with the Eric Stevens article.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this kind of leads into both. So basically, and we're talking about the fact that Eric Stevens put out that the Ducks took swings at Stamkos and Marchessault and missed, right? Missed on both eventually to the Nashville Predators. They weren't the only two teams that were making offers. There was a bunch of teams, obviously, that made offers. But it had come at the end of the day, after a day of disappointment where, I mean, this was one of the quickest free agencies that I've ever seen. Like, usually there's at least a couple big names that last to day 2 or day 3. Everybody was gone. I think Tarasenko, and if you at this point you can't really call Tarasenko a big name anymore.
Well, he's a big name, but he's not a big player, I would say.
Yeah, and it's just he's the only kind of holdout at this point, and I think it's more so because he wants to go back to the Panthers, so they're trying to figure out a way to make that work. But everybody was gone within the first few hours. It was quick, gone, and then we had to wait all day to see if the Ducks would sign anything or anybody. The only news we got was the bringing back of Brett Leeson and Urho Vakanainen. And then, Eric Stevens, late at night, puts out an article with the mention that the Ducks did make offers, an attempt to sign Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault, and ultimately came up short, which, again, you like to see them involved. You understand, why both those players ended up going to Nashville in a better spot to win, better spot to compete, and Nashville paid them pretty goddamn well, too. It wasn't like they took a pay cut to go there, so...
Right, and the other thing that I think is important, and I can't remember if Stevens mentioned this, I don't think he did, but Marchessault explicitly said, either in some kind of media availability or whatever, but he explicitly said that him and Stamkos ended up on the phone being like, do you want to go to Nashville and play together?
Well, they'd play together before in Tampa, right? So
right, in Tampa Bay. So they already had a pre-existing relationship. And so what they ended up then with is an opportunity to play together again on another team. Now, everything you said about Nashville being in a position to be more competitive right now is absolutely true. We saw, I think, the opportunity to go play with Andrew Burnett is a very exciting opportunity for both of these players. We've seen him have success putting teams in a position to move forward in his tenure in Florida, what he was able to do with Jersey, and this year with Nashville. And there being a surprising team that made the playoffs that a lot of people didn't think would make the playoffs. I have no problem with that. I don't mind that they took swings and missed, right? You made the comment to me like it's a little concerning because he didn't get his plan A. And I said, and my comment to you was, I don't mind that his plan A didn't work out. My question is, how does he pivot from here?
Yeah, that's my concern too.
What is his plan B? That's the thing for me that I have questions, concerns, comments, whatever about. But going after Stamkos, going after Marchessault, justifiable, top six, right shot, goal-scoring forwards. What do the Anaheim Ducks need? Top six, right shot, goal-scoring forwards. This is players that make a lot of sense to go after, and ultimately it's two dudes who are friends deciding to go play in Nashville together. Again, like, it's stupid, but it's real. The power of friendship, intangible culture crap thing matters. Being able to go to work every day and see your buddy who you haven't gotten to play with in 6-7 years ago because your GM was an idiot at the expansion draft. You know what I mean? Like, that stuff's cool, man. That rips. And I think technically Marchessault was already in Florida at that point, but the point still stands. Yeah. I like the idea behind those. I am glad to know that there seemed to be some hesitancy about term from this team. I said to you, I wouldn't give Stamkos more than 3 years. I would pay him as much as $8.5 or $9 million for 3 years instead of giving him a fourth year at a slightly lower cap hit. And I'm very happy for both of those guys. I'm very happy for Stamkos that he gets to go somewhere where he's wanted. And again, yes, Anaheim missed. Yes, it's disappointing. But the way they missed makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't mind that.
And depending on whatever plan B ends up being, it potentially could end up being a blessing in disguise, in a sense.
Absolutely.
As much as these would be fun signings for the Ducks to get, they are stopgap options. They're guys who come in for a couple seasons to mitigate to hopefully help coach up the young kids and get them to a spot where they can succeed and help mentor them and help also the team just be a little bit better in the meantime. But bringing in Stamkos and bringing in Marchessault does not mean the Ducks are making the playoffs next year, right? Like, it's not a guarantee, and by any means, I don't think it's enough to take them from third last into the playoffs. When you look at the other teams that they're going up against and what they've done to add and make themselves better. So it would have been nice for them to add them, but if it leads to, and again, speculation, we'll get into some of the names we talked about, but them going out and adding a Line A or, God forbid, a Marner or something like that, right? A younger player who fits into the timeline a little bit more, then it potentially could be a blessing in disguise for the Ducks. And again, it is nice to know he wasn't just sitting up at development camp and not doing anything on the first day of free agency. He was trying, and then by the time those deals materialized, everybody else was gone within the first 10 minutes, so there's really not much else you could do because you focused on two targets. and everybody else focused on their targets, and everybody was gone, right? Like, beyond that, you're not going to, rush out and pay what the Bruins paid Elias Lindholm, or, what Anthony Duclair got with the Islanders, and overpay just to kind of get something across the line.
Right.
You got to be somewhat happy with that he didn't get desperate and didn't, go out and just pay a guy, ridiculous amount of money more than whatever the next team was offering him, just to do something, just to make a splash and have something happen. So, there's pros and cons from the way the Ducks have handled free agency so far. And of course, hockey Twitter and Ducks Twitter has been just a complete shit show in terms of both sides of the fence, and people saying, time to panic, and what the hell is he doing? He's doing nothing. And then, the opposite side of that, people saying, oh, like, it's not that big of a deal. I think there's, we talked about this before the show, but it's a good mix. If you can feel both ways, but it's the extreme ends of those spectrums, which is obviously become kind of a problem. So,
yeah, and I think the thing you have to say to both groups is, this was a one-day free agency. Yes, free agency lasts all summer or whatever, right? There's nothing stopping you from signing free agents in August. Everybody fucking is gone, though.
Yeah, don't see this too often.
When your GM comes out and says, I want to add a right shot forward and I want to add a right shot defenseman, and I would like both of them to be of a caliber to play higher in the lineup than lower, yes, we still have trades. There are still some names out there in free agency that we could go after 100%. But when it doesn't happen, just, again, by the nature of time, and it sounds silly, but it is just the nature of the passage of time, your options continue to get lesser. You have less things that you can do. And so I think for the people who are concerned or mad, or because there are people who are like ready to fire Verbeek, which is fucking insane to me. But it's not unfair to be like, there's no one left. So he told us these things he wanted. Not, again, he didn't guarantee anything. He didn't come out and going, this is what we're doing. He said, this is what I want. This is what I would like to do. He can't do those things through free agency now. So now it becomes about what avenues are available via trade. Well, there aren't always as many trades as you might think there are. Teams fall in love with their group. Teams are afraid to make changes. Rosters are big. You want to have guys you can rely on. You want to have different things here. There are teams that are going to need to move some guys around. Anaheim is under the cap. We saw a trade today, which I'm sure we'll get to. There are things here for him to do to address the concerns that he said he has about this group. Perfectly valid. It's also perfectly valid to be like, yeah, but at what point does it get diminishing returns? And it was the thing that I was talking about today on Twitter with Vladimir Tarasenko. Another account made a comment as far about like, call him and just say, we'll pay you more than whoever. I don't like that. I understand the thought process of, we need to bring somebody in, we need to add goal scoring, things like that.
That's the desperation we just talked about.
But that's what you don't want to do. You don't want to make these moves out of desperation, because that's how you end up giving John Klingberg $7 million to be bad. We talked a little bit about the show about Tyler Toffoli signing a 4x6 to go play in the Bay. First things first, his wife is from the Bay or has family and friends in the Bay. I don't know which it is, but she tweeted explicitly about having a community in the Bay that she's now going to be able to be a part of again, her friends and family. That has a lot to do with it. The other thing is, that is an overpay. I would be fine with that overpay if it was in Anaheim. But that's an overpay, and that's what we saw this team do with Ryan Strome. That's what we saw this team do with Alex Killorn. That's what the Tyler Toffoli is. The Tyler Toffoli deal is a deal we've already given out, which is bring in a winner, bring in a guy who can play a specific type of game. He can teach these guys how to be pros. San Jose is trying to get to the floor, or was trying to get to the floor, and they need guys around to help teach their guys how to be good.
Same with Chicago.
They got Thomas Hurdle.
Bertuzzi,
Thomas
Teravainen,
Hurdle is gone.
Martinez going to Chicago. So
there is a middle ground here that, again, because it's Twitter, it doesn't exist. And so I think it is important to remember that there are still Netjes and Laine and Marner and other players that I texted you today about Kyrou.
Yep.
People mentioned Rantanen, right? There are players out there that this team can go after. There are players who things are going to happen. Teams are going to need to make some moves to clear up cap space, give themselves some flexibility moving forward. There is always going to be options. The problem is the longer time goes on and the less you are able to address it, you start to lose leverage. I think today's trade is a perfect example of that. I don't think trading a 4th-round pick for Brian Dumoulin is bad. I think that's a perfectly fine trade. What he's going to bring to this team, the term, he's only got 1 year left, makes $3.5 million, $3.15 million. That's worth a 4th-round pick.
You can flip him retained at the deadline for at least a wash, right? So,
just like they did with Lyubushkin last year. Here's the other thing. Why aren't we getting a pick to take Dumoulin? Well, the answer to that is probably because Ron Francis isn't an idiot, and he knows how the cap works. And he can go, you have lots of room, and if you don't take this $3 million, you're $7 million under the cap. You're still under the cap after this contract. You need this contract more than I need to move it. That's the way negotiations work. So it just becomes about leverage. It becomes about pressure points. And again, it is a little bit weird that the player we go out and get is a bottom pair left-handed defenseman when what we know we need is top 4 right-handed defensemen. Maybe we think Zellweger, Lacombe, Fowler, Vakanainen are going to be able to play on their offside, and it's not an issue. Maybe Leno is ready. Maybe Leno and Hellison are ready, right? There's all these different things. Maybe we're going to start to move out some of these other guys, like a Lacombe, like a Vakanainen, like a Zellweger, right? Maybe these things are parts of other deals to address top 4 right-handed shot, things like that. I put out on Twitter from the account yesterday. How would people feel about trading Jackson Lacombe's RFA rights for Brandon Carlo? There are options here. It's just about the longer time goes on, the more those options shrink, and how is Pat Verbeek going to go here? The longer it goes on, the less things they do. Now you have to keep a John Gibson. Now you have to keep a Cam Fowler. Now you have to keep a Ryan Strome. You can't afford to give up money in trades because you're so far under. It's interesting. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. I think there is reason to be, again, concerned about what's going on here because we're not in the meetings. We don't know what's going on.
Yep.
But I don't think it's unfair to be nervous about people operating from that lack of knowledge because we only have what we know to go on, right? And again, I'm saying a lot of things that are like obviously true and plain on their face, and it sounds really stupid, but I do think it's worth stating out loud.
No, 100%. And I think the thing is too is like you said, this move is a precursor to other moves, and we got to wait for the sum of the parts to really assess everything. But again, like you said, the longer you wait, the more difficult it becomes to salvage this offseason because losing out on players in free agency now just again innately makes your job harder to go out and get things done because teams know the situation you're in, and a lot of teams are done or they feel like they're done. Now they've made their moves, they're up against the cap beyond moving out a few contracts here or there just to make themselves a little bit more flexible and malleable heading into the season. That's it. Like, their business is done. So to go to them and be like, hey, like, I want X player for this. Well, like, okay, but, like, listen, like, we're done here. Like, you've got to throw this in. And it just makes it a little bit more harder. And then you lose your leverage, like you said, to get anything done. All in all, I don't hate the Dumoulin trade. I do like it.
No,
I think
not
a
at all.
fourth for a guy who fills a need on this team to bring in a player who had great underlying numbers defensively for Seattle last year. The thing with Dumoulin that worries me a little bit is he seems to be the product of the system that he plays in, and his success is kind of dependent on that. And the Kraken playing a pretty good defensive style. A lot of their players had good underlying numbers defensively last year, and Dumoulin just happens to play a shutdown game, so it looks really good on his RAPM chart, and a lot of the underlying charts that you look at just looks really nice and looks really cool and looks like a good fit. So we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic, but again, for a 4th round pick to take a shot on this guy being something that's going to help out your team, it's not bad, right? Like he's got a year left on his contract. He excels at puck retrievals, leading to breakouts. He's got a little bit of playmaking here or there. He's just kind of a good piece to help out the bottom part of the lineup and mitigate having a lot of younger players that you're going to, like, do you want to run Lacombe, Zellweger, and Minchikov in your, maybe Leno as well, right? Like, do you want to run out that many young kids? It's maybe not the best option, right? And then it also, like you said, gives you the option to maybe move on from one of those pieces now to kind of fill an organizational need elsewhere. If you need to include some of those younger players in a deal for a top 6 right wing goal scorer, now you can do that. At least, you've got a year where Dumoulin can fill that spot, and you can look at free agency next year to fill a spot if you need to, or you hope that Solberg is ready to come over, or other players are making their way. Like, it just pushes the timeline out a little bit more, that you can afford to move a Lacombe because some of your other players have developed and got closer to being able to step in the lineup, right? So I don't hate it, but again, it's a sum of its parts. And this is the first of what's likely going to be at least a handful of deals for the Ducks, to be able to not only just get to the cap floor, but to hopefully add the 2 pieces that Pat Verbeek said he wants to add for this team heading into next year.
Yeah, and I think we actually haven't even mentioned this. I think this is also a part of this that makes this frustrating for fans. Is he also said, "I want to push for the playoffs."
Yeah.
If he had said, "These are 2 types of players I want to add to this team. I think they can help move along this rebuild," or whatever, right? Without saying the word playoffs. Because let's be honest, sports fans have fucking ADD. You want to talk about people who use shiny objects in front of them to change their mind? Trades, draft picks, things like that do that. Words like playoffs do that too. Mm-hmm. So when you tell a fan base that, again, this is a 6-year gap of being god fucking awful after the most successful 7, 8, 9, 10 years of Ducks history. I can get why the fans' patience is waning. Now, there are realities to that. How long have they actually been rebuilding? How long is it going to take to get out from some of the other conversations about the Bob Murray era and the decisions that he made? These are all very real things, and I don't think they're unfair points. But when your GM comes out and says, "I want to add these 2 types of guys so that we can make a push for the playoffs," and you haven't been to the playoffs in a while, and you don't add those guys, well, what does this mean? Is he a liar? What are we doing here? And again, it is a bit of an overreaction in certain places. I do think there is more leeway he deserves based on what we have seen has been a steady progress towards improving the quality of the team from the prospect pool to the everyday lineup. But it's one of those things where both of these things are true. Yes, we can be patient. Yes, we need to understand that this isn't quick. Also, it's very frustrating when someone tells you they're going to do something and they don't. So I just think it's both of those things at the same time. And I think if, without saying the word playoffs, it creates a very different context in the way fans are looking at this team. Not all fans, because a lot of fans are unreasonable and insane. And that's just the way that goes. But I do think there are a good chunk of fans who are responding to the notion that this could be a fringe wildcard team.
Yeah, no,
So.
I can see that. And listen, you're going to get these types of opinions no matter what decisions are made and what decisions aren't made. So we're used to this at that point. And I think the good thing is, like, there is a vast majority that are kind of in the middle and in a calm state. And, of course, there's voices from either end of the spectrum that are kind of the extreme ends where you're hearing the things that we've already mentioned. So the one thing I think we got to get into before we wrap, obviously we mentioned it a bit, is some of the targets that the Ducks could look at through trade. Some of the top end targets. These are mostly guys we've talked about before, but we can briefly run through it and then break down a few of the other guys. But Mitch Marner, of course, rumors up in the air whether he's going to get traded or stick out that last season with Toronto. Martin Necas is still a guy that apparently Carolina is looking to trade. I believe it's his RFA rights at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Laine is one we've talked about endlessly. Nikola Ehlers, now not being a right shot, but still a right winger, just a left shot right winger. In the same team, a younger player for the same organization. Rekor McGroarty is a guy that Winnipeg is apparently listening on and willing to move to bring some help for them in the short term. And then guys we mentioned before, guys like Connor Garland and Travis Konechny are potential options the Ducks could look at. When you hear those types of names, I mean, any of those are certainly fit the bill of a top six right winger, and in most cases a right shot other than Ehlers and McGroarty. Do you think any of those are attainable for the Ducks?
I think Laine is the most attainable because of just where that organization. I mean, again, like Don Waddell went out and spent $5.5 million a year on fucking Sean Monahan. I don't think you give Sean Monahan that deal if you don't think you can start making a push. Because I don't think, I don't think he gave Sean Monahan that deal because he thinks he's going to just be around for a few years and they're going to be crap. I think Don Waddell, he left Carolina voluntarily. Now, to what degree of voluntarily is always an interesting conversation. We don't know about the particulars. But he walked away from a contending team on some level. He walked away from that team and chose to walk into a situation that is very up in the air, but has good talent. They've got Fantilli. They've got Ken Johnson. They just took Caden Lindstrom. They've still got Zach Werenski. Like, they've got David Juracek. They've got Patrick Laine, which, even if he doesn't stay, is an interesting trade chip, right? I think Patrick Laine becomes the most attainable of that group because I don't think anything about that group would lead me to think they're not actually trying to compete. So I'm very, very curious about the Patrick Laine of it all.
Yeah, that would be the one for me too. Is I think because there also is, I don't remember who had mentioned it. Might have been Don Waddell who mentioned it. They want players who want to play in Columbus, and if the case is that Laine doesn't want to play with the Blue Jackets, then it's an easier trade than going out and getting a Martin Necas or somebody that another team is actively shopping. Like, if there is an issue on the player side and the team side that's shopping him, then presumably you could go in there and maybe get him for a little bit less than what it would cost to get some of the other players. So, and I think just fit for what the Ducks are needing. I think, again, as much as I love Mitch Marner and Travis Konechny and Connor Garland and Martin Necas, I think when the Ducks are in desperate need of a pure goal scorer, I think of the bunch, the best bet you can get in there is Patrick Laine, and I think he fits the type of players the Ducks have in their system currently. So I like it. Again, young enough that it fits their timeline, and you hope that he pans out. So I'm all for that one. I hope that's the one that pans out. I don't know what it would take to bring him in, because, again, I don't even know what the price would be at this point. Because, what did it cost for the Blue Jackets to get him? It was Roslovic,
Pierre-Luc
Dubois, and picks, right?
I think it was just Dubois and...
Because Roslovic, he went that way, yeah, for sure. But...
Well, I think it was Laine and Roslovic for Dubois.
Right. You're right.
All right, wait a minute. If only I had the internet and could look this up. Let me look it up. But yeah, speaking of Roslovic, by the way, he is still out there as an RFA, and he's a very interesting choice. He's also a type of player you have to be careful about not overpaying because he's the only name left out there. But he's certainly a player that has a good shot, could kill penalties for this team. So yeah, it was Laine and Roslovic for a third in 2022 and Pierre-Luc Dubois. And let's see, where is Columbus? Yeah, Columbus is at $69.9 million, but they've got Kirill Morchenko, they've got Cole Sillinger, they've got Kent Johnson as RFAs. They've got money that they can spend to improve the roster. Or to improve their cap situation. So even if, moving on from $8.7 million isn't nothing, they have ways around that. And then I also think technically Laine is in the player assistance program, so I don't think his cap hit counts against the cap. So I don't think they would technically lose cap hit if they moved him because of that. Because of the player assistance program thing. So I think for a number of reasons, Laine makes the most sense. I am concerned to a degree that the ask for Laine is Trevor Zegras. But I also think there's a world in which the ask for Laine is
multiple pieces.
Picks. Yeah. Picks in a couple chunks. Maybe it's a conditional second that could be a first if he hits 40 goals or some shit. And Ryan Strome or Frank Petrano or something like that. They don't have their second round pick this year, this 2025 draft, but they've still got Johnny Gaudreau signed for almost $10 million. They just gave Sean Monahan all that money. Yeah. They've still got 2 years of Boone Jenner. Elvis Merzlikins makes good money for them. Damon Severson, Zach Werenski. They've got Ivan Provorov, who they traded for as a UFA at the end of the year, so they can extend him at any point now, and again, use up that cap space down the line. So there's a lot of reasons for him to be an attractive trade target for the Ducks, and I think there are a lot of reasons for him to be a reasonable or logical or possible trade target for the Ducks, right? Because that's always the thing. Who do we want? Who can we get? He seems to be in the middle of that Venn diagram.
No, yeah, for sure.
After him, by the way, I think it's Connor Garland. My only problem with that is I don't want to put Connor Garland in my top 6. I think he's a third liner. So
yeah, that's the thing. Konechny, I think the price would be high, and you're likely having to sign and trade him because he's a UFA. At the end of that contract, I don't think you want to bring him in and then hope that you can re-sign him. Ehlers is a right wing top 6. It just doesn't fit. Again, if you want a right shot right wing, which has been what Pat Rubika said, that it doesn't fit that. Martin Necas, I don't think is the type of player. I think he would work well. I just don't think he's the type of player that the Ducks could benefit from getting here. And then I think Mitch Marner ultimately is the best player of the bunch. I just think the price is going to be insane that it's just not worth even pursuing at that point for what you would have to pay to get him from the Leafs.
If it was a top 5 protected first next year, Trevor Zegras and Olen Zellweger for Mitch Marner, do you make that trade?
That's tough. I don't know. I think probably.
Does it depend on what the extension for Marner has to be?
Yeah, that comes into the equation too. But even then, it's a lot to give up. You're getting an exceptional player in return. But if you think Zegras can be what he can be, and then Zellweger and a first round pick added on to that to just kind of make the difference to get to Mitch Marner, it's a very tough one.
I wonder if Brock Besser would be available. He's a UFA at the end of next year. He's going to be 27 halfway. He's going to turn 28 halfway through next season, a little over halfway end of February. They just signed DeBrusk. They retained Dakota Joshua. Vancouver's an interesting one because I could see them moving on from Besser, and I could also see them moving Garland to free up room to re-sign Besser. I think that's a very interesting team to look at.
Yeah,
So
they've got to do something. I feels like at some point, so be one to keep an eye on. Okay, before we wrap, I did have just a couple right shot defensemen. I think that's going to be the harder one to pull in, but a few that seem like they're available or could be available. St. Louis is apparently looking at shopping defensemen. I think Torrey Krug's the most likely option, but Justin Falk and Parayko have been two names that have mentioned. Jacob Trouba's name is out there. It's most likely Detroit, or at least that's what the rumors have been, but he still hasn't gone there yet, so that's an option. And then one that came out earlier that I think it was just a conversation between you and somebody else, but Dante Fabro is a name out of the Predators as a potential mix. I'm not really sure how I feel too much about all of those. I think probably my ideal option of those would be Justin Falk, because it's a shorter term contract, so you can get him for a couple of years and then get out of it. Trouba would probably be next again for the same reason, shorter term. Parayko is like 6 years left on that deal, and he's 31, I think, now. So that's a tough one to kind of wrap yourself into. And then I feel like Dante Fabro, as much as he's he's not even young anymore, but is a decent youngish player, I feel like it just doesn't move the needle enough to really be a significant addition to the right side of defense.
Dante Fabro, I think, is second on that list for me. I'm very transparent about this. I want Jacob Trouba. And again, part of this, especially after today, there was all the rumors about him getting traded to Detroit. It didn't happen, and now it seems like maybe the Rangers organization is leaking some information to the press in order to get the fans to start to turn on Jacob Trouba. And by the way, it's fucking working. I've seen people say some real stupid shit about Jacob Trouba over this just today, which is incredible because people have been saying stupid shit about Jacob Trouba for years, and this is a different version of it. But I think for me, the thing with him is his wife is a pediatric doctor. She's a pediatrician. His contract was set up in a way to allow her to go through her residency in New York. Part of the reason he wanted to go to New York was her ability to work at a hospital there for her residency. Again, this is all very silly and kind of fantasy casting, but I think it's important to note the Anaheim Ducks have an incredibly good working relationship with the Children's Hospital of Orange County. If she is a pediatric doctor, which I believe is accurate, that's a very promising thing. Living in Orange County is really nice. And again, I really just think Jacob Trouba would be a wonderful addition. 2 years, $8 million, take the full cap hit, give up nothing. Just look Chris Drury in the face and say, I am doing you a fucking favor here. I am taking all this money away. You have to repay Lafreniere. You have to start paying all these guys and just demand that he give them to you for fucking futures. Or hell, even give you a pick, right? I think there's a world in which that works. After that, Fabro is a UFA. I have no interest in Justin Falk. I can't explain why. I didn't like him when he was in Carolina and we were linked to him. He very much sounded like when he was in Carolina before he got moved to St. Louis was using Anaheim as a leverage point, which fine, you're going to do what you're going to do, but he never seemed to have interest in Anaheim. I don't have interest in him now. He's 32. He's got 3 years left on his deal. I don't need that shit. I'll take Jacob Trouba because I like Jacob Trouba. Yep. I think the way that he plays pairs well with a number of left-handed players on this team, all that kind of stuff. For me, it's Trouba, it's Fabro, and I don't know much more beyond that.
No, that's fair. And I do like the fit of Trouba. I think ultimately the Detroit rumors just feel too strong. I feel like that's probably the place he ends up. But it really is like a limited list. I'm more interested by the direction that they could go for a right shot defenseman than I am for a goal scoring winger, just because I think there are a significant amount of trade options out there if you really want to go out and get a high profile right shot right winger right now. It's more so than it normally is, and there's some good value to be had out there. So I don't know, man, it's gonna be an interesting next couple of days to really see what Pat Verbeek's gonna do and see the types of moves he's gonna be able to put together to really flesh out this team for next season.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I'm really excited about where this is all headed. and it should be a lot of fun, man. It's certainly not been dull, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
No.
So
No, well, we'll see. I mean, knowing our luck, tomorrow we're gonna have something break, and then we're gonna have
God,
to,
I hope so. That
we're
would
gonna
rock.
do right back. Yeah.
Double deal, Marner and
No,
Trouba. Let's go.
Line and David Jiricek. That's
There
that's
you
the
go.
one. I don't even know what
That's the
what it
one,
would
brother.
cost, but at that point, we'll see.
It would cost Trevor but it might be
It
worth
might be
it.
worth
man.
it for the two of them. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. But it was anyways. It was nice being back, guys. I love at the end of the show how we finally got your background like tied into the whole. I couldn't.
Oh, sure. I didn't even think about that part.
I
Yeah, yeah.
couldn't. I don't think I ever asked you when we first started recording. Before we were recording, I just figured it had something to do with like the draft and the kids were drafting, and then all of a sudden, nope, ties it into freaking Jacob Trouba at the end of the show. So Jacob Trouba.
There's always a plan.
No.
Always a plan.
Had to get it at the end. But anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. It's nice to see you, to chat with everybody again. We'll hopefully be back soon, break down any new news that comes out. Sure, we'll go over some of the free agent signings at some point, too. We just didn't have time to get to it today, but to go over some of the major signings. Probably wait it out for Tarasenko and a few of the others to cross the line, and then we'll review free agency as a whole, because I know there's some contracts and some of the crazy signings out there that we wanted to discuss and rip apart a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get out of here, just one last thing. Sorry to you, Edward, for another year of not signing Thomas Tatar.
Yeah. It's I'm used to it at this point. I'm numb to the pain. I honestly thought he was retiring back to Slovakia, and then all of a sudden I see that the Devils have convinced him to come back for 1 year. So my only hope is that they were the only team to convince him, and that he wasn't really available on the open market, and that's what I'm
Right.
holding on to.
That's what matters,
Yep.
man. All right, everybody. We're going to get the hell out of here. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, see you, everybody.